Welcome to a presentation in examination techniques in tax audit and investigation, which is basically D6. I am your presenter, Timothy Mulenga Msonda, a consultant from ZICA, that is Zambia Institute of Chartered Accountants. The presentation outline itself in examination techniques will start with the introduction, the objectives, competences, planning for an examination, then we'll have a look at the exam type, question, a solution, then how mistakes are commonly made in the exams. Our introduction today is basically talking about the aim of the presentation is to help students that have challenges in answering questions in D6. And the tax audit and investigation itself, which is D6, introduces students to a wider concept of auditing investigation with the sole purpose of detecting under declarations of income and overstatement of expenditure. So what are the main objectives? The main objectives of D6 are to undertake a detailed examination of financial statements and come up with a tax assessment, and also to undertake a detailed tax audit, and lastly, to undertake a detailed tax investigations to respond to other audit or investigation queries from Zambia Revenue Authority, which is ZRA. Let's look at the framework of the auditing in general. On successful completion of studying in D6, students are expected to show the following competences: to discuss the nature, purpose and scope of a tax audit, and also to discuss the auditing theory and demonstrate understanding of audit evaluation and planning. They will also be expected to collect and analyze audit evidence, as well as students will be expected to perform the audit and explain the audit reporting framework. What are students expected to in terms of competences when you are examining financial statements? Students should be able to do some of the following examples: to explain the preliminary review of financial statements, the objectives of examination of accounts, explain the compliance risk and management process, to explain the balance sheet, the income statement, and also to discuss the review of tax computations and explain the different types of expenses found in the financial statements. And when you are auditing, what competences are expected of you as a student? The auditing techniques, on completion of this study, students should demonstrate the know-how by explaining the key principles of auditing techniques and audit support tools which you are going to use. Also, the students will be expected to discuss the audit planning. You know, audit planning is very, very important for an auditor. You will also conduct pre-contract analysis and the selection of methods. You also discuss examination techniques, explain the use of indirect methods to verify the income, understand working papers, and also explain the finalization of the audit. These are one of the techniques. And earlier on, I alluded to that you as a student, when you are doing D6, you are expected to do a tax investigation. What is it expected of when you are upon completion of this? Students are expected to explain what a tax investigation is. Be able to choose and explain the investigation approach. Also, discuss the accounts examination. Explain how to undertake the risk assessment. Explain a tax investigation related to taxpayers with complete and incomplete records. Remember that there are some businesses who do not keep a lot of records, especially the SMEs. Also discuss how hidden income can be uncovered. You remember that as an authority, which is Zambia Revenue Authority, is coming to investigate, especially where you have some incomes which have been hidden somewhere. And the competence is expected when auditing a family business. What is it? The competences on completion of this study, students are able to, they should be able to explain the family business itself. A lot of businesses nowadays are being run by family members. Also, to discuss the trader and the company. Understand methods of incorporation. Discuss the transfer of business to a limited company liability. Remember that at times you would find that a company wants to transfer from a limited company to a limited liability company. Explains loans to effective shareholders. And also to understand associated trading activities. Then also, remember, you'll be expected to explain methods of profit extraction from the family business. Lastly, you'll be expected to explain and discuss withdrawing your investments from the family business. Now, continued on the competence levels which is expected of a student, you would find that one of the sectors which will be expected to do is in the banking sector. Banking sector is one of the challenge which in terms of investigations has to happen. On completion of this study, students are expected to discuss the audit issues related to the separate source of income, explain the realization basis of income recognition, understand tax issues related to leasing income, explain accrued discounts on government bonds. Remember that a lot of banks are right now participating in the purchasing and the financing of government revenue through government bonds. Understand special deposits, reserve accounts, and also discuss credit card income. Another thorny issue in terms of competences is in the mining sector. Remember, the mining sector is the backbone of the Zambian economy. It's the backbone of the Zambian economy. The Zambian economy relies heavily on the mining sector. On the mining sector, so what is expected of the students? On completion of this study, students are expected to explain and understand the classification of capital expenditure in the mining sector. Remember that in the mining sector, there's a lot of capital expenditure, especially in terms of machinery. A lot of machinery has to be rolled up into the mines. Then you'll be expected to evaluate losses from non-producing mines. You'd find that a lot of mines are not producing and they are declaring losses. Explain also the loan relationships with the shareholders. Discuss separate profit statements for each mining, which we call ring fencing. Discuss separate reporting for capital expenditure for each mine. Discuss the sale of base metals, precious metals to related parties at reference prices. This is one of the thorny issues. You'll find that there's a lot of transactions happening between related parties. And lastly, you'll be able to explain the gradual reduction of qualifying capital expenditure. Now, let's try to look at what happens when you are writing an exam. This is a paper which has got 100 marks. 100 marks is on the table. As a student, you are expected that you should write all the 4 compulsory questions. Each question carries 25 marks. So 25 by 4, it comes to 100. What are some of the issues which you as a student is expected to understand? You need to know, first thing first, you need to know the location of the examination center and where it is. Be there at least 1 hour before the exam. Manage your mindset. When you reach the exam room, remove everything you have had in your mind, whether you have a bereavement, whether you are not feeling too well, the exam will go on. So you remove that. It is natural to feel anxious about the exam. Everyone does that. But with good strategies, you'll be able to overcome that. Remember that some stress has some beneficial effect. It spurs you to work hard. Plan Then when you are planning your time, plan to spend at least that 15 minutes to browse through the question paper. Then when planning, plan to spend at least 1.8 minutes on each 1 mark of the question. For example, you have a 25 marks question paper. How many minutes should you spend on that question? You are going to spend 45 minutes. And out of that 45 minutes, experience has shown it that if you spend at least 10 to 15 minutes just planning how you are going to handle the question paper, you'd find that when you start writing, it's all systems go. From the word go all the way, you just be writing, getting it from the question paper where you planned how to write, you just be writing, and things will just be flowing through your mind. Remember that it's very, very important during the 15 minutes to jot down useful facts and figures to use in the question. Is very, very important. You also need to know to understand your examination paper. What kind of paper? There are times serious mistakes have been made whereby a student doesn't know the kind of paper you're going to write. You sit there and you start looking in the ceiling and find out what kind of paper is this because of lack of preparation. So when you are given that paper, I would urge you not to rush into writing before you have checked through the paper. Read the instructions and all the questions slowly and at least twice. It's an emphasis that you read the question paper slowly and twice. Then read the instructions and the questions slowly and at least twice. Highlight how many questions you are going to write from that paper. Fortunately for this paper, you have no choice. You have to write all the 4 questions because they are compulsory. Please ensure that you write legibly and neat at all times, because by answering that, you'll be able to help the marker to be marking, at least to give that marker an impetus to say, impress the marker, impress the examiner. Do not just write as though you are writing at a grade 7, writing a love letter to somebody. Let's try to, yes, and in continuation for the planning for an examination, you should also make every minute to count. Once you are clear about the questions you are going to write, then choose them and ensure that at least 10 minutes you leave it at the before the end of the exam. That 10 minutes, you are supposed to go back to your answer script. Check through each and every type of, there could be some grammatical errors you could have made whilst writing. So ensure that out of that, you remove out the chaff and ensure that all the questions have been planned in a very sequential order.
Take your career prospects to the next level with Zika.
Our diploma in accountancy is an essential qualification if you're planning on entering the accounting profession.
The Zika tax program at both certificate and diploma level equips you with an enhanced understanding of the field of taxation.
Our diploma in public sector financial management is ideal for accountants or trainee accountants working in the public sector.
And CA Zambia, a respected designation designed to ensure that graduates are highly trained to hold senior positions in the workplace.
You can study through flexible options like self-study as well as part-time or full-time through our accredited tuition providers.
Zika sponsors the top CA Zambia graduate to the One Young World Summit for Young Leaders and also offers scholarships to the top university accountancy graduates from recognized universities.
Visit zika.co.zm now for more information or find us on Facebook and LinkedIn.
Don't delay, your future awaits.
Let's try to look at an exam type of question which can help us to see how we can approach this type of question. Let's look at XY Limited, which is a registered company dealing in computer software. The company has been facing liquidity problems as a result of depressed market and the stiff competition from the other players in the market. The business recession, as it is happening during this time, and downward spiral being experienced by company XY has led it to falling behind in terms of remitting tax and the other obligation to Zambia Revenue Authority. the management of XYZ has resulted to understating the incomes and overstating their expenditure. Then you normally would have required. What is required? This is what is required before you even read through the opening scenario. I would encourage you as students that you use a bottom-up approach. Start with the requirement first. But because you would find that in the scenario itself, you would find that you are able to pick what is required to answer. You'd find that in the scenario itself, there might be answers which you are supposed to use. For instance, in this type of question, we had the answer question requirement A, which was able to explain briefly any 4 assets that may be transferred when a business is transferred in a limited company. Then also to explain the difference between desk audit and tax audit. And we had also part C and D trying to have other those requirements. You'd find that in this type of question, we have A, B, C, which are basically standalone questions. They are not even related to the scenario. It's only question D which was related to the scenario. So you'd answer these questions without even referring to the scenario. But in order to look smart in the exam, I would urge you to that on this sheet of answer script, you answer them the way they are. A on one sheet, B on another sheet, C on another sheet, and D, finally D on another sheet. Then looking at the solution, you would find that in question A, we were asked what the requirements were. And we had those answers where the following assets are expected to be transferred from one business to a limited company. But of key importance here is that this type of question requires students or candidates to recall of knowledge from the text manual. So in short, the students are expected to recall and write in what is in the text manual. So you regurgitate. You should have mastered what is in the manual itself for you to present it to the examiner. So it is very, very important that you master what is written in the manual, other than leaving it that way. Then continued on with the solution. A field audit, on the other hand, involves a visit. That's the other part of the question. Here again, it is important that students need to mention in each particular instance where the audit is being undertaken in each particular issue. And it's of very importance that the definitions, as you are writing them, they need to stand out. What do I mean by standing out and separated? You need to use what I would call subheadings. Subheadings would help you to score high marks. As you are writing subheadings, you would find that it is flowing down. You'd find that a question of 6 marks, you are required to write 3 particular items. You'd find that a subtitle itself would carry 1 mark. Then the explanation itself will also carry 1 mark. So you have scored 2 marks. I would call them cool marks. 3 marks because you are able to score by writing subheadings, then the explanation there. You'd find that even your work and presentation looks very neat. Then the other one as well, this is the last one, which was talking about loans and applications that is required. And as I earlier on mentioned, that it's required to that you regurgitate. In short, you recall what is in the manual. You master what is in the manual and put it out on the script. Then we also have this slide which is talking about the types of audits. We have a full tax audits, we have a limited scope issue-based type of audit, we have also a single issue audits. Continued on, we have education audits, credibility audits, and these are also part where this is also what is expected of a students, that they should be able to recall what is in the manual and put it down there. And lastly, students, as I mentioned earlier on, that they are supposed to use subtitles which will end up, you make them score full marks. Let's look at the common mistakes which leads to exam failure. It is painful to fail an exam because it's expected you have put in so much as a student to pass an exam. Why should you fail this exam? You have passed your grade 9 exams, you have passed your grade 12 exams, but why should you fail this time around? What leads to failure of students' exams? One of the key issues is inclusion of irrelevant materials in detail. You would find that a student writes all they know about a particular subject without even touching on the main issue. You end up writing so much and not scoring any marks. So I'd urge you as a student to avoid everything you know and write it on your answer script. Markers, because they will give credit for what is relevant and leave out what is irrelevant. Another issue which leads to students' failure of an exam is trying to use the detail in the scenario. It is very, very important. Like the other example we just looked at, you would find that you have to pick what is in the scenario. What is it in the scenario? What is the examiner expected of me as a student? Relate it to the scenario. Don't answer a question the way we would want it to be asked. Answer what has been asked. The general answers that refer to what is in the scenario will not score enough marks to pass an exam. Then there are also misunderstandings of the question itself. Question requirements. What is expected of you? If it says explain, you need to explain. Also, the marks attached to that to the question also will spur you, will notify you how much you should write about. Because failure to do that will just decrease your earning of the marks. Then failure to attempt all the questions. This is one of many problems we find that students are faced with. You'd find that out of 4 questions, somebody writes 3 questions. And out of those 3 questions, you have attempted only part of those questions. You'd find that it's very difficult now to score the full 100 marks. You miss 1 mark, you miss 1 question, you are talking of trying to write an exam out of 75. And out of that 75, you will not even be able to score half of the required 12.5 marks out of a particular question. So it is very important to finish writing, attempting all the questions, because you might be lying at 45%. But if you leave a blank page, where do you expect the marker to get the marks from? It's blank, it's blank. It's said that figures don't lie. If you have not written, you have not written. So it's very, very important that you write all the questions. Then avoid mixing up your answers. You would find that on one sheet of paper, some students rather, would write, for example, they would write part 1A of the question, one sheet, part 2 of question 2 on the same sheet. Then you are confusing the marker. Where will the marker start marking from? You'd find that scoring marks would also be difficult. You'd find that one question paper is written on one page, page 1. The other part is written on page 5. You are making the job of a marker very, very difficult and reducing your chances of you scoring the full marks. So it is very, very important that you avoid doing that. Then, lastly, you should avoid writing the same answers on the same script. Rather, what I'm talking about here is writing 2 questions on one script. And it is expected that as a student, when all is done and said, you browse, as I said earlier on, you leave 10 minutes for the exam to check for any mistakes in the exam script you have written. Any typographical errors, ensure that all your details have been entered on the exam sheet, and ensure that every page is well covered. Cancel out what is not necessary in that exam. And it is my prayer and hope that this discussion will help you to finish your paper and pass the exam. If there are any challenges or any issues to refer to, please do not hesitate to contact Zambia Institute of Chartered Accountants. Thank you.